What's going on, everyone? It's Ben here at YGO from Zero, back with another video showcasing some of the matchups in LOB format. My last video showed how to play an Exodia deck against an Aggro deck, and here I want to sort of do the opposite. I want to show how you really want to play an Aggro deck against the Exodia decks, and if there are any different ways that you can play that could potentially give you slightly more of a chance of winning. There aren't really many ways to deal with the Exodia deck. Of course, you could side into cards that are more targeted to deal with a stalling strategy, like a lot of smaller beaters and some more stop defenses, another arm ninja, things like that. But in the actual games, Exodia is pretty dominant. But I figured I'd show off this matchup because if you do want to play in this format a bit and you want to play aggro, then you will have to face off against some Exodia decks. So I covered this aggro deck in a previous video with the aggro mirror match, which I highly encourage you to watch if you didn't watch it. So I won't really go into a deck breakdown here because you can watch the other video for that. Instead, I'm just going to jump directly into the games, so let's do that. Okay, now in the matches, we got our first matchup against Kane. We're playing aggro, they're playing Exodia. And unfortunately, we're going second. You always want to go first in this format, no matter what deck you play. That extra card is very important. So they've got a little bit of an upper hand here, but we do have a good opener, especially when they just set one card and pass. So we're going to Pot of Greed first, just draw those cards, and then bring out a Skull Redbird to attack in. At this point, we don't know that they're on Exodia yet. We just know that they have a defender. So we're just going to play as if this could be either aggro or Exodia at this point, and just set a card and pass turn. They're up, they set one card and pass to us, and we draw Pot of Greed, which is just great no matter what deck you play. And we bring out a Witty Phantom. We don't want to bring out the Urabi just yet because in case they have a board wipe, that would be pretty bad for us. But we will be able to Fisher here, clear away their Aquamador, and get in for a decent amount of damage. So that's what we do. Next, we set another bluff, because again, we don't know that they're on Exodia yet. So if they're on aggro, we do want to give the appearance that we have Trap Hole. And now it's back to our opponent. They draw two with Pot of Greed, and they get another Pot of Greed, and they get another Pot of Greed, which is kind of scary when an Exodia player can play all three Pot of Greed in one turn. But luckily, it does not look like they have Exodia yet, but they do have Dark Hole. So that clears away our field, and they'll follow it up with a set and set. And another set, too. I don't think that last set is strictly necessary, but it can give the appearance that you have a Trap Hole and are trying to hide it among multiple cards, in case you're worried about Arm Ninja potentially sniping it. But I don't really think that's that necessary. But it can't hurt. It doesn't matter one way or another, really. We draw a defender, and we just go for the Urabi because we're still on the offensive. We don't really need to set or anything. We go in, our monster gets destroyed by the Maneater bug, and they have another set. Now at this point, we could probably intuit that they are on a stall sort of strategy because they haven't really capitalized on us having an empty field for a while. But we haven't seen any Exodia specific cards, so maybe it is an aggro strategy and we're just getting lucky with what monsters we get and they're getting unlucky with the ones that they do. But we'll just set a defender just in case it is still aggro. And they'll actually write Geki here, which I'm not sure how much I like that. I guess they're saving their Maneater bug for when we attack in, so that does make sense. But the Raigeki probably could have been used in a more profitable trade at some point. But they'll set another card, and this is just a bit too tempting for our Raigeki. We're going to go for it, and then just bring out a giant soldier. Because we're just on the offensive now. We could have potentially set the giant soldier of stone as backup in case they were on the aggro strategy, but they really have not been capitalizing on our empty board states if they were on aggro. Like, if they were on aggro, I would have said that summoning the giant soldier of stone they set in attack mode would have been the move here. And they didn't do that, so I feel pretty safe summoning out the giant soldier of stone. They do have Swords Revealing Light, which is pretty bad for us. And they will set one. So we have to go for the Armed Ninja here. They could have a Man-Eater Bug there, or they could have a board wipe. But we have to play the Armed Ninja just if they don't have anything, then the Armed Ninja will be very, very useful here. So we kind of have to set it. And they do have a board wipe, so that's pretty bad for us. We do lose our Armed Ninja. We lose a way to clear that Swords Revealing Light. But they're not attacking us, so it isn't the worst thing in the world. We will play our swords here, because I figure that they might have a Man-Eater Bug set, and playing swords like this will guarantee that they get rid of one of their monsters. And now it's finally revealed that they are on Exodia, so we can sort of transition fully into playing against Exodia instead of against aggro. They'll set a back row, pass to us. We're just waiting out the swords, really. There's no reason to commit anything to the board right now. So we're just both sort of walling up. They set another piece. I'm not sure I would have done that because a board wipe sort of just clears out everything here. But again, it's a piece, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. We do have the board wipe, so we will be able to summon out an Aquamador, and this will actually be game because we have double Monster Reborn. So we were luckily able to scrape a win out in the first game, despite not having swapped into our sideboard of Exodia Hate. And we got kind of lucky there given how much they drew. But that sometimes happens in these games. Now, again, Dueling Book doesn't show the sideboarding process, which is kind of annoying because the sideboarding process is very important here. But my main way of siding against Exodia is I side out all 3 trap holes, all 3 Swords Revealing Light. I side out the Man-Eater Bugs, usually, because Man-Eater Bugs are a bit too slow, in my opinion, against a stall deck like Exodia. They're never going to be attacking into Man-Eater Bug with their monsters, so you have to manually flip up the Man-Eater Bug on your turn, which isn't the best. So I generally do swap out those Man-Eater Bugs, and that's 9 cards that I've swapped out. I can also see swapping out Aquamadors as well, because they have the lowest attack points out of the monsters that you're siding in, and you don't really need to worry about defense. So after you've swapped in all those, swapped in, the Armed Ninja in the side deck, the stop defenses, and a bunch of weaker beaters, now we're in a pretty decent place for going up against Exodia. So let's see how that works out for us. They're going first, of course. They want that extra draw. And we have a pretty decent hand here. They're setting a card with no back row. That's great for us. We can just go into the stop defense and summoning a beater without fear of running into a trap hole. So we will be able to clear their Giant Soldier of Stone with a Urabi. We're saving the Skull Redbird in case they have like a Fisher or Raigeki. And the good thing about siding into all these weaker beaters is that it can make using removal on some of the weaker ones necessary for your opponent, even though you have stronger monsters in reserve. So that's part of why we went with Urabi instead of Skull Redbird. Because once they've used up all the removal on our weaker monsters, we can then bring out a Skull Redbird later and attack in for more damage. So we don't need to set anything here because they're never going to be summoning unless they swapped into the aggro build, which, you know, if they did that, then you're kind of screwed. But if we have the read that they're still on Exodia, just pure stall Exodia, then trap holes do nothing against them. So it's better not to bluff and just keep them guessing as to how many monsters you actually have in your hand, and so what you can actually do against them. So they're going to activate a swords here and then set a monster. That's pretty good. We don't have an armed ninja, so we have no way of actually dealing with these swords, so we're just going to pass. No point in committing more to the board. Well, that just runs into a board wipe. So they set another monster, pass it back to us. We still don't have anything to do here, but we are at 7 cards, so if we didn't play or set anything, then we would have to discard a card in the end phase. So we do set one of our spells, and then we pass back to them. They set a card, could be a trap hole. It doesn't really matter to us because we've got so many weak beatsticks that they might have to trap hole one of those, and we like that trade overall. We finally draw the armed ninja just a bit too late, so what we do instead is we just set a spell card. We can save our armed ninja for a later Swords of Revealing Light, and they have another Swords of Revealing Light, so it was a good thing that we saved it, I guess. Although if we had set it last turn, then we would have been able to get rid of the swords automatically, which would have been pretty good for us. But I think it was the smart play just to save it. We do set the armed ninja and run into a Raigeki, which is a bit rough because that was really our only way to get rid of the Swords of Revealing Light. But that happens. You know, you can't really play around that too much. I guess we could have set the Fire Yaru as a bluff and then set the Armed Ninja on this turn, but I don't really think it would have made a difference. Like, we can see their hand. Oh, their hand doesn't have any removal. It's just all Exodia pieces. So it might have actually made a difference, but I don't think it would have mattered that much. We will set the Fire Yaru now, just to bait out any more removal they might have. But that is the end of the game, unfortunately, because they do draw the last piece of Exodia. So nothing we could really do there. It's just sometimes the way it goes against Exodia, even if you side into Exodia hate, because they just the pieces were near the top and they drew swords. So, and we didn't have an out to swords. So nothing we could really do about that. We do decide to keep the more aggressive Exodia hate strategy, though, because they didn't side into the aggro smoke screen. So we figured that we can just keep doing this without really any risk of punishment. And this time we'll go first and hope that we can do a bit better this time. So I'm gonna hide their hand. So we're going to just start out with a set defender. Now, we could have set something like a Celtic Guardian just to have a little bit more damage on the board. But the way I figure it, if they did go the aggro smokescreen, this safeguards against that. And Giant Soldier Stone only has 100 less attack than Celtic Guardian. So I don't really think this is a bad move here. They're going to set one of their own and set a back row, passing over to us. We will bring out the Celtic Guardian. It's not the strongest beater we have in our hand and not the weakest, so it can put forward some offensive pressure. And they do trap hole our Giant Soldier of Stone here, which is a sign that we can probably get through their monster. And so we do just attack in with the Celtic Guardian. Maneater Bug destroys it, but we still have a lot of beatsticks in hand, so we're still feeling pretty good about that. They set another monster, and we'll bring out a Giant Soldier of Stone. We could have also brought out Trial of Nightmare if we wanted the same level of attack, but ultimately the defense on these things won't matter because they're not ever going to be attacking in. So we do get rid of a piece, which is pretty good because it's a sign that they don't really have any defenders in hand. And they play Pot of Greed, which drew them into a defender, unfortunately. And we don't really know that, so we just summon out a Trial of Nightmare, try to get in for a little bit more damage, but unfortunately we cannot. So they'll set another monster. Luckily we have a Fisher, so we can clear away their defender and hope that this last card isn't a defender. Now, committing a third monster to the board might be a bit greedy, given the number of board wipes in this format. But I think it is worth it just to get in as much damage as we can, because we need to end this game as fast as possible. Because the longer this game goes on, the more likely it is that they'll be able to draw into Exodia. And it's just, we've got so many beaters in our deck that even if we lose all of these, it won't be the worst thing in the world, probably. So we might as well commit to the board. And they do have a board wipe, which makes sense, because board wipes are a dime a dozen in this format. We drew board wipes of our own, and we could use them here, but we don't really have any offensive follow-up to follow that up with. So we might as well just wait, see if they commit a little bit more to the board. And then when we have actual follow-up, then we can use our board wipes. They do commit more to the board, so we're happy about that, and we're especially happy that we got a Pot of Greed. So let's draw 2 more. Now we can attack in with our Giant Soldier of Stone after board wiping, so we will do a board wipe. Summon out Soldier of Stone, get in for a cool 1300. And now we're in a pretty good position. We have a Raigeki to clear whatever else they might bring out. If they don't destroy our Giant Soldier of Stone and we draw another monster that we can normal summon, and we manage to avoid Trap Hole, then the Monster Reborn will make this lethal on board. So that's pretty good. And they don't do anything about our Giant Soldier Stone. They don't have a back row set. And we do, in fact, draw a monster that can attack in. So we do win here. We'll just stop defense. I think we probably should have Raigeki'd, but to be fair, they did use up 2 of their Man-Eater bugs. So that's fine. Oh, I just forgot about lethal here. Yeah, this was a major misplay on my part. Yeah, because we did have lethal. If we had Raigeki'd first, and then summoned Witty Phantom, and then activated Monster Reborn, we would have just won here. So we definitely should have done that. That was my mistake. You know, we can't all play perfectly. So it happens sometimes. Then they do have a Raigeki to punish us for it. But as long as they don't have Exodia this turn, and they don't have swords, we will win, because we do have Raigeki, we do have Monster Reborn, and they did not actually have swords or anything to deal with what we had. So we didn't play that perfectly, but I hope that was a good illustration of how you can sort of side into a more aggressive aggro strategy against Exodia and hope to actually take some games in the back half of the match. Of course, we lost one of those games, which just goes to show that even when you're using explicitly Exodia hate and they aren't just playing the smokescreen aggro, Exodia can still win just on its own merits. Like, there just aren't enough tools to deal with Swords of Revealing Light and the other stall cards in this format. So Exodia is still definitely very formidable, but aggro can put up a bit of a fight. Now let's go to the other match I have prepared to see if this can work out twice. Okay, we got our second matchup against Tenurg here. We're playing aggro, they're playing Exodia. Let's see if we can manage to pull out another win like we did before. So right off the bat, we're kind of on the back foot. They're going first, which is, again, unfortunate, given that the Exodia player just wants that extra draw, gets them one step closer to Exodia. And on top of that, they have Pot of Greed too, so it just gets even better. They'll just set a monster, set a back row, and pass. We swords, hoping that it's a Man-Eater bug and it kills itself, but it is a piece of Exodia. So now we know immediately what they're on, so we can just bring out a Giant Soldier of Stone, attack in, and then pass to them. We're just going all aggro at this point. They set a monster. We summon out another Giant Soldier of Stone, and given that they set a piece last turn, I choose to not fire the Raigeki now, because I figure that they don't actually have any decent defenders. But unfortunately, they do have a defender here, and so we can't really do anything about that. We can Raigeki next turn, but until then, there's nothing we can do. They will Fisher away one of our Giant Soldiers, and we're just drawing a bunch of Man-Eater bugs, which is kind of unfortunate, but we can at least use it to clear the Aquamador. Given that they have 2 back row, I think it's likely they have a trap hole. I don't think it's worth it to summon the Witty Phantom and then Raigeki. So I figure we can use the Man-Eater bug, clear away their defender, and that we do, because they have a swords. Unfortunately, they have a swords, so we can't get in to attack, and we just sort of have to pass back to our opponent and wait. We don't really want to commit anything more to the board, given that they could have a board wipe. So we just pass back again. And luckily we get a Pot of Greed, but it's too late to really do anything about that sword still. We will set, because now we have 7 cards in hand, so we might as well put some down. And we've got enough beaters that if they do have a board wipe, we're okay with losing an Aquamador. So we pass it back to them. And they did have Exodia there. I didn't show the Exodia, but they drew Exodia. So nothing much we could have done there. So for the sideboard, we do side into the Exodia hate sideboard. Bring in all the weak beaters. Bring in the extra stop defenses and armed ninjas. So hopefully this will be enough to deal with their Exodia strategy this time around. We are a game down, which is unfortunate. Last time we got kind of lucky where we won our first game without having the Exodia hate in. So we got to go perfect from this point on. So let's see if we can pull it off. We're going first. We set a Witty Phantom because we don't really have much going on here, and that's a monster on board that will then be able to attack in next turn when we make a push. There you go, they draw a Pot of Greed, they play Pot of Greed, and they've got a swords. Makes sense, you know, if we have a Man-Eater bug, that would really punish it, but we've sided into a version of the deck without Man-Eater bugs, so unfortunately it seems that they've sided as well, and they've sided into the smokescreen aggro. So they've got a Urabi, which is a pretty good beater. And it does get over the Witty Phantom. So we will lose that. And they'll set a back row. And luckily we drew a defender, so we can set that. But we're not doing too hot, honestly. That swords is a major problem. They're still going on the aggressive. And they have another back row there. These Witty Phantoms are good when your opponent is not playing aggro, but when your opponent's playing aggro and you draw too many Witty Phantoms, it is unfortunate. So we do set that Witty Phantom just to block for a turn, to protect your life points a bit. And they do commit one more monster to the field, which is pretty good. So we can just Raigeki that, clear that all out of the way, summon out a Urabi, and then set a card. We summon the Urabi instead of setting it because we figure that basically any beatstick in their deck can get over a set Urabi. But for Urabi in attack position, the only thing that can get over it is Skull Redbird. So now it's their turn. So they draw. And Swords is finally gone, which is pretty good for us. They do Fisher the Urabi, which is rough. And then they summon out a Skull Redbird. So they're going full-on aggression now. Because they could have just summoned the Skull Redbird and hit over the Urabi. But they're getting in for a bit more damage, which is fair. I mean, they can afford to do this because we're playing an objectively worse version of aggro. So we will take 1550 here, and then gets passed back to us. And this is exactly why it's a worse version of aggro. Fire Yaru does nothing against Skull Redbird or Urabi or anything. It can't defend like a Giant Soldier Stone. It can't do anything. And they have a trap hole to stop our Skull Redbird. So we're kind of just we can't do anything. We weren't able to summon Fire Yaru. That was a misclick because we already summoned the Skull Redbird this turn. So, but we're in a pretty rough spot now. They'll bring out Woody Phantom, which just makes things worse. It's not the best beater, but you know, it gets in damage. So we're very close to being in a lot of trouble. So we've got a Monster Reborn now, just to protect ourselves a little bit. Bring back the Skull Redbird and attack into the Woody Phantom. There's nothing really else we can do. We can set the Fire Yaru as a bit of a safeguard. You could also argue that, you know, we could have potentially brought back like a Urabi and a Skull Redbird, crashed the Skull Redbirds together, attacked in with the Urabi to hit the Woody Phantom. Just because if they have a board wipe now, they'll still have Skull Redbird on the field and we'll have no way to get rid of it. But I think this is fine. They do have a board wipe, and they do have a Monster Reborn, so that's going to be pretty bad for us. And it gets worse because they've got another Monster Reborn. So that is the end of the game. Nothing really we could have done there. I think even if we had activated Monster Reborn, I don't think we would have been able to get out of this because they would have still been able to amass 30-50 this turn without normal summoning. And they did have another Skull Redbird in hand. So it wouldn't have mattered. We were dead no matter what we did. And that just kind of shows how dominating the Exodia deck can be. Like, the smokescreen side just eats this sort of counter Exodia strategy alive. So, yeah, it's tough. It's a tough matchup. And there isn't really a good way to play against Exodia as an aggro deck. You've sort of got to get lucky on a lot of different counts. And you can mitigate that a bit by siding in a lot of inferior beaters and things like that. But then you sort of got to get lucky that they don't side into an actual aggro deck to face you when you've got the weaker aggro deck. Now, I will say this, if they do smokescreen into aggro and you just keep your aggro deck the same because you're anticipating that, that can be pretty decent. But in that case, you know, it's an aggro v aggro mirror match, and those can really go either way. As we saw in the previous video that I posted that featured a bunch of aggro v aggro mirror matches, you know, those are nowhere near a free win for either aggro player. So it's basically a situation where you're very, very likely going to lose the first game because Exodia is just so good at stalling you long enough to draw their pieces if they don't get extremely unlucky. Then if they do side into aggro game 2 and you've sided into your sort of inferior aggro deck just designed to run over Exodia with as many monsters as you can, then you're probably going to lose game 2 because their aggro deck is just much, much better than yours. If you keep your aggro deck the same, then it's a 50-50 chance for whoever wins, right? You're going first, which does give you a bit of an advantage. But overall, it's not clear cut who's going to win that game. And this is why Exodia is just, in my opinion, the best deck in the format. It's pretty much got game 1 on lock against aggro. Game 2, it likely also has on lock, unless they don't side into their aggro smokescreen, in which case you can potentially squeak out a win there. But that is slightly unlikely, given that the aggro smokescreen does exist. So it's a rough deck to face. I don't think there's a clear way of beating it besides just luck. But I hope this video was informative to you and might help you if you ever decide to play this format with an aggro deck and go up against these sort of Exodia builds. And while I've gone through sort of all the major matchups that I'm willing to cover on the channel, I will be putting up some more videos of some duels going on in this format, I've got some ideas for one or two other videos that I can do related to LOB format while I'm working on the Structure Deck Yugi Kaiba format guide. And that should be coming out sometime in the future, so get excited for that. And get excited that we'll eventually be leaving this terrible, terrible format, because I think this format is not very good, despite the fact that it can have some fun gameplay at points. Anyways, if you want to see my upcoming videos as they come out, be sure to subscribe. And if you have any feedback, like always, write some comments and let me know. Let me know what you'd like to see. Let me know what you'd like me to improve, if you have any suggestions for that. And yeah, this has been Ben with YGO from Zero, signing off.